have some questions for us as we'll do like a little, maybe 5 to 10 minute dive, and then we'll see what's happening for all of us. So, here now, is there peace here? Is there peace here? Are you peace? Is there openness here? Are you openness? Is there tenderness, care, or love here? Are you tenderness, care, or love? Is there connectedness here? Are you connectedness? And lastly, is there happiness here? Or are you happy? And this isn't the happiness of a part that comes and goes from experience. This is the happiness of the absence of lack, of fulfillment of your being. Is there happiness here? What arises in you in response to those inquiries? What parts are loudest? Is there a skeptic part that comes up and says, yeah, I just don't know about that? What are your two loudest parts right now that respond? Is there a critic saying, oh, I should have more of that Susan was pointing to, this openness, this freedom, this beingness? Is there a critic? Is there a spiritual achiever that arises? Oh, I want more of that. I want more of that freedom. I want the happiness. I want to know the intrinsic happiness. See if we can discern, like, what are your two loudest parts that come up, the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that we label as parts here. And it might have nothing to do with that. It might be, oh, my back hurts, or I have a lot of work I need to be doing, or I want to go out in the sun. What am I doing on this Zoom on a Sunday? Or I'm hungry. What are the two loudest arisings in you? And as we're aware of those, we bring our awareness back to the beingness. Perhaps it's the background, whatever the flavor is for you. What's the most prominent flavor of this beingness, of this self right now? Is it peace? Is it tenderness? Is it connectedness, openness, love, joy, happiness? What's your word? Can we sink into that together? Let ourselves just sink in to the self, whatever quality that is. What's it like if it fills the body? If the body is pervaded as that, as self. And can it even be the space? Can it even maybe include the space around us? whatever this beingness is, whatever this self is. And from here, we just have a loving indifference towards what arises. We're just sinking into this. We sink in together. This is the first view in effortless IFS. This is just the resting as self, and having a loving indifference to the parts. And then from here, just going to open some in our awareness of the parts. Maybe it's those two loudest parts. What's it like to rest here as self, as beingness, and be aware of the weather, what comes and goes, these parts, these precious aspects of us? What's that like in you? And from self, what is your relation to these arisings, to these parts? This is the second view in effortless IFS. Sometimes we call the roomie's guest house, this sense of the guests that come and go, and there's just a welcoming of them all. Sometimes we call this the infinite hot tub, where everything that arises, it rises in the hot tub. It's just soaking in you, in this beingness, in this self. Or sometimes it's like throwing a birthday party for the parts. It's celebrating them. So right now, can you find that there's an openness towards the parts, that there's a welcoming of them just as they are? And you might have some parts it's like, no, it's not okay. I don't welcome that part. I don't welcome the discomfort in my body. I don't welcome the stress. Can all of that be welcomed? Rupert Spira speaks of when he finds contraction happens in his system, he just comes here to this place we're calling the guest house. And instead of a no, he just says a yes. He just notices the yes towards the part, that it's okay, it's welcome just the way it is. What's it like in your system if everything that arises was met with a yes, an okayness? What's that like for your parts right now? Notice what's here, what comes up. Find a yes from the self, that they're just welcomed as they are. For some of our friends, that's the entire path home. The second view of yes and welcoming. No resistance. And notice maybe there's a part that's coming up. It's like, okay, Sid, that's longer than 5 minutes. This is enough. This a part. And this can that be welcomed as well? Anything that's arising here, welcomed into your guest house. And then notice how intimate are you with these parts, with what's arising in you? Do they seem to be off in the distance? Or is there a sense of intimacy with what's arising? And as you notice the parts, and let me just do a quick check with the sense of noticing. Where are you noticing from? Is there a part that's helping? Is there a helper part that's aware of the parts that's helping? And if so, let's just be aware of that. And can we notice from the spaciousness that Susan was speaking of, this self, this beingness? As we notice our parts, they seem, is there an intimacy? Is there an intimacy with them? And if so, are they entirely separate from self? This is the third view and last view in effortless IFS. And you recognize that perhaps they're not completely separate from beingness, from the space. And what's that like? And there are glimpses of that. That like? And what's that like for your parts? To have this sense of this intimacy. And what's it like somatically? What's it like in your body right now? And lastly, there's no right way to do this. What we're interested in is what's happening inside of you. What's it like in your body? What's changed over these 10 minutes today? So maybe an exhale. And in gentleness, as we come back together and notice that you're not alone, that there's this connectedness, that there are 5 friends with you. Does something change when the eyes open? Does another part arise? And if so, just we're aware of that as we come together. And then we can just shake this all off because there's nothing that we're doing here. We're not going anywhere. There's nothing we have to do. There's nothing we're achieving. We're just playing together. And whoa, that was a lot, Sid. That was a lot. It's a Sunday. And gosh, for Jonathan, it's like 6:15 in the morning. This is crazy. And so let's just gotta see what's happening for everybody. But before we do, let me do my very quick disclaimer housekeeping thing that I'm a mediator. I'm not a psychotherapist. It's not the IFS of psychotherapy. Friends and colleagues coming together. If everybody's willing to be responsible for their own journeys today, if I could get a thumbs up from you, please. And secondly, I've got this being recorded, I think, yes. And that is, as always, it's only my square that would be shared. However, the audio that you speak today could be shared as I make this available for others who couldn't come. And with Susan, who's being new with us, there's no need to share anything uncomfortable. We don't go into the story of the parts. Instead, we're interested in what they long for in this home, the spaciousness you were describing. And if there's anything that you share that you're like, ooh, that makes me a little uncomfortable, just stay on afterwards, let me know, and I can go delete, delete, delete. If everybody's good with that, if I could get a thumbs up from you, please. Awesome. So that was a lot. How's everybody doing? Who's got something bubbling? Who wants to start?
I'll go, Sid.
Yay.
I had the experience, which is really great, that right before this call, by the way, it's 7:15, not 6:15 here, luckily,
Good.
that I was highly triggered by an email. Uh, and your meditation was fantastic because it could really change my relationship to the self that was triggered. And it was interesting to watch. I like the thing of, can you fully say yes to the self being there? And then kind of giving that particular self, which is one of my bigger triggers, like a hug. And then kind of going through the then can you see as part of the space or the other bigger self. So it's really quite a process, because normally I brace against a self. It's related to some of the stuff I've been through in the last few
Yeah,
weeks.
so when Jonathan says self, he's referring to kind of parts
Oh,
in
yeah,
IFS.
right. Yeah. Um, so it was very valuable guided meditation, and I appreciated that. I like this, as you know, Sid, I like methods that can take under 3 seconds. Um, so the just saying yes to a self, almost like as a mantra, like, because often you have to keep on saying yes uh, to a part. And I could feel the bracing from it melt into like, oh, okay, this is what this self or this part feels like.
What's this yes, this hug? What's that like, Jonathan? Like where is it? What's the space of that? What's that like? The yes.
Well, it feels like a softening in my chest from kind of a shielding against to allowing. And as I allow more, it, everything is ultimately just vibration and sensation. And I realize that the vibration, the more I allow that vibration and sensation, the more it um, starts to feel just like spacious awareness.
I got another question, but let me just check in with everybody on this. As Jonathan speaks of like just say yes, just the yes. Uh, does that resonate in your system, or do you have a different word when he speaks of just the yes? This his 3 second, this 3 seconds is just a yes. And then Jonathan says it's like a hug. A hug. Does that translate, or do you have a different image, a different somatic experience? And then Jonathan also says, ultimately, everything is vibration and sensation. What about that? The sense of where does that go in your system? The sense of, oh, it's vibration and the difference in the vibration of this beingness, of this self, of this spaciousness, of this hug, in contrast to whatever the reaction, whatever the resistance, whatever the contraction is in your system. Jonathan mentioned there was a response to some emails, an email that was a contraction. What's that like? The difference in the vibration? Does that work with your system, or does it the sense of vibration, sensation, everything is vibration? And then what's it like? The vibration of self, the spaciousness meeting the vibration of contraction. What's that like for all of us? And Jonathan, what was that like in your system? The resistance that had come up to the email being met by the yes.
Yeah, it's a noticeable softening. I also notice uh, Rhonda's kind of putting her hand over her chest. And I think that helps too, because uh, this was a very young part that gets very afraid. And to feel like my hand there or something helps to feel the security that kind of calms that part down.
What about that for all of us? The, the somatically, Jonathan speaks of a hand on the heart, or Rhonda, this. What what helps your parts? Some people go breath, like breath helps. What somatically supports this hug, this yes being received? Because it's almost like sometimes we've all had this with a partner, maybe a romantic partner or a friend, and we say, I love you. And for us, it's like the dearest thing ever, but for them, it's not received. So for our parts to receive this yes, this hug, this welcoming, what helps your parts receive it, to hear it, to feel the vibration? And then last question with that, do you find that some parts they're like, duh, of course there's love and welcoming here. I get it. You can feel that self, that yes, they hear the yes. And then we have other parts, right? That might be kind of in the shadows, that might be contracted, that might be exiles, that might be kind of ones that still have remnants of trauma, and they can't feel it at all. They're like, yeah, what are you talking about? This yes, this is a bunch of new age silliness. And for those parts, what is it that helps them hear, receive, feel this welcoming, this self? Any kind of final words on that, Jonathan, before we see kind of how what this touches in other people, what you shared?
I think of the Sedona method where um, they might have somebody focus on welcoming the resistance because that's what's there. So welcoming that as a step towards softening. And for me, a lot of times there's a yawning that happens that releases resistance or releases releases resistance to a part getting something. And if I yawn, just that gesture generally helps quite a bit.
That we relate to the yawning, or maybe some of us shake, move our heads, release, open up. Any kind of final thoughts to tie it all together, Jonathan? Or
Uh,
good?
I think that's it. That's a lot.
That's a lot. And so, just for all of us, how was that? What's here for you in hearing where Jonathan took us? Anything bubbling that you'd like to share that comes up for you as you hear that? As yes, Janet.
Yeah, I like the yes and the um yawn, also the sigh when you mentioned that in the opening thing that I really resonate with that. And so the image that came to mind of the self qualities that are here is just uh caring, acceptance, and the peace. And then parts
What
that
was that?
came
Wait,
up
what was that
was,
last one? Caring, acceptance, and peace?
yeah, peace. Just like peace.
Oh, wait, wait,
And
wait, wait, wait. Wait, Janet, do that again. Like what? Peace.
just like
Wait, wait, wait.
peace.
Peace.
Yeah, just
Before you go on, let me just share this. Like one of like the great gifts for me that we get to be here like this is so much of and Susan, before you guys were getting here, she was saying her interest is in self-leadership, this knowing self. And it's such a gift that we have our friends here that can help us like resonate with different flavors of self. Like we can hear peace, but then we have these bodies here somatically. We can feel it, we can resonate, we can tune in, and we can like Janet is showing us this piece that plays in her, and like we get to know these different flavors, almost like a piano, different notes, and like, oh, peace. Wow, that's a different flavor of peace. I like it. Tell us more, Janet. What else?
yeah. And so these two parts that came up was one is just so appreciative of being able to be connected, that connectedness. So that's like the blue. And then the other one is this part really seeking, I want those self qualities like this. I want more. And then so as I was painting them, then I really got the sense that to make them closer to the edge. They were just kind of in the middle, and it's like, no, they really want to touch the self. And then blending in each other, you can't see it so much there, but like even with each other, like, yeah, we're in this together. We're all part of the system, and we both have such great intentions of wanting more of the self and wanting those self qualities. And we know we're not quite there, and that we're a little bit distant from that, and like can see, oh, I want that, like that reaching, and like no blame or shame, but just like, I want what she has, you know. I want peace. I want joy. I want yes to be said to me. And so
Let me ask everybody a question with this. Since, as Janet shared her artistic depiction of self, of these parts, of these two parts, what's your image for your system? Does it look like Janet's? Is it like this one that feels this appreciation of connection, blue? What, and this what, can you relate the like the one that wants more self? Do you have a part like that? But how does this how do you, what's your image of it? How does your system make sense of this? Of the parts that are here, we've been talking about it sometimes as the foreground and background, the parts in the foreground, the self in the background, and sometimes that switches, like Susan was sharing. And for some of us, that even loses meaning, that kind of dissolves into self. What's your image right now in your system? Is it like a galaxy? Self is the galaxy, and the parts are planets? Or is it more like that hot tub we talked about? Or is it more like a theater, a stage, and the parts are how did your parts are like the actors that are happening on. There's theater that's happening in each of us, in Jonathan and Sarah and Rhonda and Susan and Janet, and they're dancers. What's your image? What's your version of that? What's your version? And then what's the relation between the self and the parts? Like for Janet was describing her parts wanting to get more to the edge in the image. What's the relation? Tell us more, Janet.
that's pretty good. That's it.
Hmm. Hmm. And let me ask you one more question. Like as we all see you right now, as we see Janet, I'm wondering, like I see this caring, this acceptance, this peace, and I also see joy there in this beingness of Janet. And it's like, and what's the relation between the self, between qualities of self and the parts? How's that like inside Janet right now?
It's like a budding up to like, oh yeah, kind of like that. Kind of like up
Mhm.
to the edge, you know. It feels like
The
that. It feels
edge.
like,
So is it like a
you know,
cozy, like when I hear you say it, it feels cozy here. It's like a
yeah,
coziness in
it's
that.
like kind of snuggle or spooning, or you know, just like my dog wants to always be right against me, sitting on the couch or laying in the bed, or you know, he always like wants to be touching, and it feels like that. It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, these parts just want to be, you know, snuggled right in there like they fit.
Oh, that kind of like, Jonathan spoke of it as a hug. This yes is a hug. And then Janet's describing it as like this snuggling, this spooning, this sense of fitting right in there. What's your version of that? Of this relationship between the parts and the self? Snuggle, spoon, hug. What's your word? And you might have a part that's like, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense. It's not like that at all. And just what's it like in you? Like before we go and kind of uh I'll just kind of go around in my screen unless there's something burning bubbling. But before we highlight another, is there anything bubbling for anyone in what Janet shared and what Jonathan shared? Anything bubbling, comments?
Yeah, for me, it was all going well. And then you said about how do we see us? I've forgotten what you said, but anyway, I got the Milky Way and I got the planets. And this relates to what came up just now with Janet saying about the spooning and being cozy with the parts. I realized that my parts I was relating to them as if the planets were like, don't look too close, because Earth from a distance looks pretty beautiful, but you get up close and it's kind of all, wars and acting out and all this stuff. So, and then I was thinking, my parts that came up during your guided kind of meditation, we're all sitting around drinking their milk like good little children, but actually they're naughty little children. So I actually have got a part coming up that is relating to the parts as naughty children. So I had a teacher kind of making sure they behave themselves around the milk table. And the planets, you don't want to look up too close because they're pretty. They're all misbehaving. So I had a
Yes.
part that's in the way of self that's just come in. I don't know if it was there. I don't think it's been there all the time, but it certainly came in when you started looking at the relationship.
Perfect. Perfect. What a gem you've offered for us, Susan. Because when we all hear Susan speak of this part, it says like, don't look too closely. The kids look like they're drinking milk and sitting around, but really they're naughty. They're misbehaving. You don't want to look too close. From a distance, everything looks fine. And in her, she describes it like a teacher part that sees this. When you hear Susan speak of this part, what responds in you? Is there compassion for it? Is there what responds towards that part in Susan? This like one that's this teacher part, the one that don't look too close. Can you see, yeah, what responds to that in Susan? Is it being met by self in you? Is there a sense of including that part, like loving that part in Susan? Is there just compassion for that part? Or is there a part that's comparing, that says, oh, everything's going great, that part's a problem, it's kind of messing things up? And then what's your version of that part? As we hear this part, don't look too close. These parts are really problematic. They're naughty. They're misbehaving. What's your version of a part that kind of evaluates that way? That sees problems? See if you can find it in your system. And like, where do you find it? Where do you feel it? Where do you see it? Where do you hear it? See if you can really hear that voice, the resonance in your system. And then, can that be welcomed as well? Can this guest house, this space, this galaxy, this hug, this snuggle, can it include that as well? This authority, this inner authority that's coming and evaluating, can that be welcomed as well? And if it can't, if it's like, no, you don't get it, that's really like, this is an authority voice in my system. Can you find okayness that it's here? Can you find okayness in your system that there's a part that's saying, just don't look too close. It isn't so beautiful here. It's not innocent here. All right. How's that playing for everybody? Susan, what are you finding?
Yeah, I can, well, actually that part's really exhausted, so it's quite happy to kind of be seen, and it's been seen. But there's appreciation as too, because it does sort of keep things orderly. It's helpful to have a bit of order. But
So here's the question for are we, what eyes are we looking through right now? Is there a sense of blending with that part as we're aware of the kids drinking the milk? For all of us, as we're aware of our parts, what eyes are we looking through? Are we from the spaciousness, the welcoming, the hug, the yes, the snuggle, the self? Or are we kind of blended some with maybe a part that's evaluating, oh, like where are we going next with the group? Or like where, the sense of these parts, well, maybe Susan's right. You don't want to look too close at the parts. Like you can see that they're problematic. So what's your relation with that teacher part, Susan?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a blended one.
Mhm.
I think it's one that keeps things in check regularly.
Yeah. And then for all of us, if we can find what's your like right now, she's got some blendedness with that one part, with the teacher part. What part are you most blended with? Maybe it's just very little blended, but can you find what part right now are you most identified with or blended with? Maybe it's a little thing like, oh, what am I going to say? Or things I have later on today, or this healer part, or this comparison part. Which part in your system right now are you most blended with? Before we continue, is anybody having difficulty finding a part that's a little blended? Can everybody find that? And from here, the invitation is, as you're aware of that part, for Susan, it's the teacher, can you be aware of another part simultaneously? Can you see two or more parts at the same time? And how do you do that? For some of us, we zoom out a little bit. How can you be aware of the one you're most blended with and another one at the same time? For some, we see it. For others, it's all somatically. We feel it. So you just feel two parts at the same time. And what happens for you? This is one of Jonathan's moves and one of my moves for kind of returning to the space of self and being aware of the parts, getting some space. Does that help in your system, Susan?
Mm. Yeah, it broadens it out a bit, brings in a bit more spaciousness.
Yeah. And then last question. What is not okay with the blendedness for all of us? As we notice, whatever we're most blended with right now, is it a problem? Like for the part, it's not a problem. For the teacher part, it's no problem. There's no problem that it's kind of blended. What part has it be a problem? Is it the spiritual achiever? Is the critic? See if you can discern that. And is it okay? Can you find from self, from this yes, from Jonathan's yes, can you find that there's a yes to what is? Even the blendedness, that self has no problem with it, that self is a yes. Gosh. All right. Any kind of final thoughts on that, Susan?
No, that's really helpful. Those two exercises of the two, and then a part that's got a problem with it. That was fun. Yeah. So they're having a
Awesome.
little row about something now, so I'll leave them to it.
Awesome. Whew.
There's a lot
That
of
was exciting.
polarities to every part, it seems to me. There's the opposite is kind of present, lurking somewhere, the opposite view or something.
About that. Isn't that cool? Like you got like, hey, here we go. I got an idea. And then there's like an opposite. And this is what slows the process down for so many people, right? It feels like we have like the parking brake on because we go back and forth between the two poles. Instead, in effortless IFS, we try to go open up to what Jonathan was pointing to, this yes, and what Susan was pointing to, this openness. And from that, we can be aware of the polarity. We can be aware of the parts like the galaxy and the planets. And then we're not blended with them and we don't have to go in slow motion. We get to be like, woo, there it all is. All right. How are we doing? That was a lot. How are we doing with what Susan just shared? Anything bubbling with what Susan just shared? Any comments?
I could share.
Before you share, awesome, Rhonda. Let me just see how everybody is just before we dive in. Before we
Yeah.
dive in with Rhonda, because she's going to take us to there's going to be a lot of magic here. I just want to just let me ask everybody, how are you? How are you? And let's just notice what parts are in the foreground. How are you? What's up here? Is there like, God, I'm a little exhausted. That was to follow Susan and to really find the part that was blended. That was a lot. I'm tired. Like, notice what part, if there's a tired part, if there's an excited part, like Rhonda's about to share. Wow. And like, what's here for you? Or if there's a part that's thinking about your day, all of that, just notice the parts in the foreground. If there's a part that's thinking about polarities, if there's an understanding part, and then what's it all arising in? What's it all arising in? Is it the yes? Is it the beingness? Is it the openness, the peace, the love? Or is it like Janet's words, this caring, this acceptance, this peace? What's it arising in? And now we're about to go to the next feature in this multi-feature movie, which is Rhonda. And like before we go there, as we notice Rhonda's square, what do we think is there? What's her qualities? What's her background? Is it like Janet's? Is it caring, acceptance, peace? Is it different? What's her most prominent quality of self as we notice Rhonda? And then what are her parts? Are they like Susan's? Does she have a teacher like that? An evaluator? Is that like her biggest part? What are her parts that are most prominent? Okay, I am so curious. Rhonda, tell us what's going on there.
Wow, what a welcome. We're practicing welcoming all the parts. So so a lot has been shared and so I'm just gonna toss out what's present for me. The image that I have, where you talked about the galaxy and then, people had a different each different imagery, and the imagery that I have is like, I used to have one of these, it was like a candle holder. It was like an oil lamp. You put the oil lamp thing in the middle, and then but the container itself was like people holding hands in a circle. And so I picture, like, I always picture my parts as like they're all like in a circle holding hands, and they don't all like each other, but they're all like but they're all there. And
Rhonda, let me ask
from
everybody
what I
this
can
question.
tell, anyway. Yeah.
Let me ask everybody this question. As we hear Rhonda describe her parts in a circle holding hands, just as we go along with her in this, what's the relation amongst your parts? Because this is pretty like advanced what Rhonda's speaking of. Like the parts are actually the sense of holding hands. Because often in our systems, the parts don't realize that there are other parts here. We call it internal family systems, but that it takes a long time for parts to start to recognize that they're part of a family, that they're part of a system. What's that like in your system? Do some of your parts recognize that they're in relation to other parts? That they're kind of not doing it by themselves? Do some of them even hold hands? I just love what you open, Rhonda. I just want please continue.
Well, I kind of connectedness was the big theme for me. And I connected with yesterday a part that what do I want to say? Like, it's not like I didn't know it was there. I knew it was there, but there was a deeper, like, there was a visceral connection with it yesterday, with like the pain that was there. And so, and then in this process, in the meditation that you did, it could have been you, it could have been Jonathan, I don't know, but there was a recognition that that there was some, sorry, it's early. I'm trying to put words on things. It was sort of, this part was, really felt trapped. It was a very painful feeling of being trapped by, by something a parent did, right? So, and then there was this recognition that like, oh, well, that like abusive part, well, that's me too. Like I have that too. And it was really gross. Like it felt so gross. Like when I had that recognition that, because everything is me, right? So that is me also. And there was this, contraction initially. And then what happened as through everyone sharing was that in this space where all the parts are holding hands, the light that's burning in the middle of everything is like, there was just grace. There was grace that was present. And then in the grace, like everything calmed down and like all is well. And then like everything became light. So that was cool. That was like really, really, that was really great. So I just have this sense that for example, there's a perfectionist part in me, and there's also this grace, which is like not so much a part, but like a quality that's just kind of like available all the time. And so feeling the grace, feeling that space just kind of infused with grace, it just calmed everything. And just made everything okay, just as it is.
Made everything okay as it is. Susan was describing her version of this at the very beginning of just that. Grace made everything okay as it is. What's our version of that? What's your version of that? Because Rhonda was describing the sense of the perfectionist, of a part that felt trapped, part that felt trapped. And then a recognition, wow, this trappedness, this sense of this parent, well, that's a part inside me too. That's an expression inside me. All of that, and then the sense of grace started to infuse through the system. And then kind of everything calmed down. And then there was a sense that everything was okay. What's your version of that? How does that occur in your system? And in Rhonda, it's grace. In Jonathan, it's the yes. In Janet, maybe it's a snuggle. We're not done, Rhonda. What's your version? What's your version? Is the quality grace? Do you have another version? Is it peace for you? Is it love? Is it emptiness? Is it stillness? Is it openness that infuses? And the parts, everything's okay. Do your parts get a sense of that? Of an okayness? What's it like for your parts when that happens? When this is here? When the yes is here? When this grace infuses? Do your parts, what's it like? How do your parts feel? How do your parts find the okayness? Do the parts, like Rhonda described, that something calmed? Do your parts calm? How do we know that it's the parts? Do you feel the calmness? The parts calm. And what's that like? How do you know that? You feel it somatically. What's that like for you? How do you know that that little candle in the center of the circle is starting to infuse into everything? How can you tell? How do your parts know this okayness is here? What's that like, Rhonda? How do they feel? How do you, when you say everything's okay, how do the parts, what's that like for the parts?
It it's like the intimacy that you spoke of earlier, where um there's an equanimity, you know? And so like it's okay that this it's okay that this um heart that's really in pain right now doesn't like it that that other part is here, like, and but there's not resistance to it being here. There's so like it's just all okay. It's okay that it's here. It's okay that this part doesn't like that it's here. There's a sense of like there's a sense of like it's all being held, you know, and so in this like loving space.
So do they feel that just like the parts have a sense of holding hands, even if they don't want, some of them don't want to, there's a sense of holding hands. Is there a sense of their being held in the loving space? Does your system experience that sense of being held?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, um, yeah. So like the funny, like if you think about children, right? And how they're holding hands in a circle, like they can pick who they want to hold hands with, right? They don't have to hold hands like, with with a part they don't get along with. Like that other part can be over there and it's fine. And it's just all allowed.
Mhm.
Um,
So they can feel your system, like the parts can feel the sense of like being allowed to
but
be
there's a
as they are.
unity. There's a unity. There's a field that there's a um there's an awareness. This is just going to come out. There's an awareness in the grace and the light coming together. There's an awareness that it's like a unified field, or that they're each like an essential part of something. And so there's less comparison of like one part, compared to another. So it feels like that intimacy that you speak about.
Let me
Yeah.
ask a question for all of us. This just gets back to how your parts experience self, how they experience this. And in Rhonda's, it's just this light, this grace, this welcoming, this everything's okay. How do your parts experience it? So it might be a sense of welcoming, love, care, presence. For Janet, it's like these edges that they kind of cuddle up to. What's it like for your parts as we make this more and more real? Rhonda, anything else you'd like to share with us?
Just that when the grace came up for me, it reminded me of what Susan was sharing at the very beginning when I came in, about that sense of well-being that like that can either be in the background or in the foreground. And today there was that sense of grace being in the background and then coming into the foreground. And when it was when I remembered it, or someone called my attention to it, and then it was really present in the foreground, um and then kind of moved back into the background, like because it did its thing, and now it's like chill in the background again. So that's the only other thing.
Mm. How are we all doing? How are we doing? Just hearing Rhonda sharing her system. It's arising for us. Does a spiritual achiever come? It's like, I want that light that just that infuses everything. I want that everything is okayness. I want that parts holding hands and feeling this kind of welcoming and acceptance of them the way they are. Notice if we have a spirit, because often the spiritual achiever like that comes up when we hear something beautiful like this. And can we hear that's just a precious part that's trying to help us? Thank you so much, Rhonda. Any comments, anything that's coming up in your system in response to where Rhonda took us today? How are you doing? How are you doing? We're gonna go to Sarah in just a minute. I just want to, because you're gonna need to get your seatbelt on, and before we go to Sarah, anything that's wanting to be shared before we take another dive, because this is a lot. I mean, I gotta shake it off a little bit myself. It's like just going with Rhonda where she took us. That was so much, and we just shake it off. And Janet has something.
One thing that came up for me is that this part of me that has some body pain like came up and wanted it to be known that it's not all like the pretty picture. Like it wants to be known. It's like, well, not all of us feel all pretty and snuggly, like, or I guess a part, yeah, I guess it's a part that is recognizing that there's pain. So it's not exactly the pain part, but a part recognizes like the contrast and recognizes that the pain is emerging and wants to be seen. And then a part saying, look, it's not all pretty. Like there's that lightning bolt of pain that is in the picture
Yes,
too, but they don't want to
yes,
ruin it. So it's like on another page, it's like they like that there's the pretty picture, but also wants it known that there's pain. And so doing art like on the next page. So just like know that it's present. So that came up for me.
I'm so glad you said that, because we kind of jumped over that in Susan's a little bit. And just this lightning bolt of pain. Hey, maybe we're feeling, what were your 3 words? Caring, acceptance, and peace is self, and parts are kind of getting cuddly. But wait, there's this lightning bolt of pain here too. Is that fully included as well for all of us? And what about parts that all of us have had difficulties in our lives? It's just part of life. And it's just, we have parts that still carry some of that. And some of us might have parts that carry remnants of trauma and shame and not good enough, and life is scary. And then we have parts like Susan was pointing to, maybe the ones that are drinking the milk are really a little mischievous. Oh, we're going to do this. And then we have parts that they can be, they want to play and break rules, and the rebel parts and all of that, and parts that are still really hurt in our system. Can they be included? Can they be held hands with too? Can they be welcomed? And can they experience this grace, this self, this care, this acceptance? Can they be in our painting? Can they be in our painting or in our galaxy? Are they included as well? And just to push the edge just a little further with that, can they be included even if they don't change, even if they never change, even if they're always that lightning bolt of pain, or that sense of, I don't like this, or I don't like this life, or it should be different, or I hate this, or it's not fair. If they never change, can they be included in our galaxy as well, in our painting, in our grace? Anything else you'd like to share, Janet? Good. That is it, right? Yeah. Any other comments, Susan, Rhonda, before we dive into Sarah Land?
I just love the way that part is relating to Janet, the way it's just like just calling attention to the contrast, and like it feels very like cooperative. You could it feels like there's a partnership there, that it's just like, oh hey, remember this thing, you know, keep this on your radar. Yeah, very cool.
Thank you, Rhonda. Susan, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to appreciate that Janet brought that, because I really enjoyed Rhonda sharing, and I got into that kind of all as well. It was lovely. And then a part came out that said, I sort of checked in what my parts felt of me, and they don't really know I'm there, self or something. And then I'm like, what am I doing here in this meeting? Everyone's kind of got this strong sense of self, and they're all doing great. And you know, I'm a fake, a phony, and a loser. And but I didn't want to bring that in, because I thought I can't bring another negative in, because I'd already brought one negative part in, you know, if you like. I mean, oh god, here we go. So I'd already kind of brought the tone down, and now I was going to bring it down again. And then Janet had a part that was trying not to kind of appear, which I thought, oh, okay, thank God for that. So I appreciate that. It made all my parts relax again.
Thank you. Well, we don't want to bring the tone down. Those parts, no, not. I want to suggest that this is the real fun is when we're having this party together, which just feels like kind of what we're doing. It's like a parts party. It's a celebration of our parts. That especially those that are like, I'm a fake, I'm a phony, this, I don't know this, or I should be different, or something should be different. Like those are the ones we just get to adore that are here. And we don't have to, and we don't have to like adore them and make them uncomfortable. Oh, come, let me hug you. We can just adore them from afar. And there's just a sense that they get to be included too. I love that. And that's really, talk about vibration or frequency or this. I mean, that's really when it becomes interesting, right? When we start including even those parts, we start including those. So thank you, Susan. All right. As we like shake all of this off, like woohoo, because we got 22 more minutes and we're about to go into Sarah land. And before we do that, as we just noticed Sarah Square, where are we gonna go? Because Sarah's my friend who's like has this aware, like for her part, I forget what the number is, but it's like 65, 70 parts that she's aware of, like her system, like she's got a really big circle, Susan, like holding hands. I mean, she's got a lot of parts. It's like, what parts are most prominent in Sarah today, and what are they arising in? What is beingness for her? So as you join me in the curiosity, like where is she going to go? And we put our seatbelts on. All right, Sarah, what's happening there?
Thank you, Sid. Thank you, everyone. Well, I showed up today a bit blended with a rejected part. So I was kind of in that low mood, that low vibe, and then it kept rising when I had some distance from it. And it just kept asking for attention, like, oh, love me, oh, I want to be here. And I just really tried to be there for that part. I also noticed my distracted part came up, want to distract me from being with that one, with the rejected one, and from even being present here. Then a student part came up. I noticed that part when I realized, oh, I'm taking a lot of notes. And that student's like paying attention and taking a lot of notes. The rejected one came up again when Susan mentioned the teacher and, oh, these kids, they look innocent, but they're not that innocent. So my student part, it kind of shifted into a rejected part. So, and that's okay. Like I just had to be there with that part, and just comfort it and make it feel like, oh, it's okay. You're okay. You can be here. Even my cat was interrupting a lot, and I was like, okay, you can be here too. So yeah, I had to lock the poor cat out. And yeah, there's a part of me that feels guilty about locking her out, because I need to focus more here.
Let me invite everybody into what you're sharing so far, Sarah, because I don't want to miss any of this. As we hear Sarah's parts, there was a rejected part. There was a distracted part that was trying to kind of take us away from being with the rejected part. There's a student part taking notes. And then there was a sense of the student part getting kind of feeling kind of guilty or wrong, and it became the student part started to feel rejected. As Sarah described these parts, what did that evoke in you? What met that? Could you find parts that came up, saying like, oh, I have one like that, or oh gosh, that's scary? Like what parts came up in you as Sarah was describing her system in these parts? And then could you also find self here that was kind of meeting, welcoming, being with what Sarah was describing as she described the rejection, the distracted, the student? Find that they were being met from the spaciousness in you, welcome there. And then lastly, just like the tuning fork thing, could you find kind of your expression of these parts? A part that wants to distract you from being with some other parts, distract you from discomfort. Can you find that in your own system? A distracting part. And where do you find that? Does it have a voice? Does it have a feel? Does it have an image? A distracting part. And do you have a part that maybe just as Sarah was describing, that student part, it started to feel rejected itself, or there was something maybe wrong with it, as Susan was describing her experience of the kids and the sense of, well, they're really mischievous or naughty, not good. Did you have parts that were taking some of that in and maybe feeling, oh, maybe she's talking about me. Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm not so beautiful myself. Maybe I'm not innocent. Did you have parts that went that way in your system? And then I'm curious about with Sarah's system, I'm curious the sense of, and then there's a sense of comforting, of meeting these parts. I'm curious what flavor of self is there? What is it that's meeting them? What are they arising in? What's the space in you, Sarah?
Sense of just, it's okay to be here. All of these parts. I love that feeling. That feeling of, oh, it's okay, you can be here. And when Jonathan was mentioning the yes, okay, yes to that part, yes to that part. Like every time I said yes to a part, it felt better. I wasn't so blended with it anymore.
So this okayness, it's okay to be here. For all of us, when we hear Sarah say that, where do we find this okayness? Where do we find this yes? Does it have a sense of a location, or is it more of it's just here? This okayness is here. It's really a big question. I'll ask that again. Does it the sense of the okayness, the yes, does it have a sense of a location, like like a sense of space, or is it just here? And what's that like for you? Where is this okayness, Sarah? Where does it come from?
Just is.
Beautiful.
It
What
just
about
is.
for yeah?
Yes, when Jonathan mentioned the triggering email, I realized, oh, I came with a few triggers. I already had that rejected part triggered. And just saying yes to it, everything was okay. It just is. It's okay. And I was feeling the resistance. I was feeling it, a pain in my shoulder. So I was trying to ease that pain. I was trying to touch it and to just, like massage it and make it feel better, but that did not make it feel better. It felt better when I accepted my feelings, when I was just okay with my feelings. And that was amazing. I realized, oh wow, the pain in my shoulder is gone.
Wait. So there's pain in the shoulder, and then maybe something was resisting it, something wanted the pain to go away or to change. And then this okayness that you're describing, where there's there's okayness, there's acceptance of it. It's just what is. And when that became more, I don't know, more pervasive or something, that the pain actually, there was some relief of the pain like that.
Yes, the sense of okayness is relief as well. Relief from all of these feelings and even the somatic experience of these feelings.
Can we all follow the universality of what Sarah's pointing to here? Like, in Rhonda, it was grace. And in Janet, it was like the borders. And in Susan, it was this openness. In Sarah, it's this okayness. Like we're just getting to know these flavors of the self, of this beingness, of what Sarah says, what if, it's just what is. And then we're exploring the relation with what happens for your parts, the experience of this that comes and goes, the parts when they're met by this beingness, the self, what is. What else, Sarah?
There was an artist part that was happy for a moment when it saw Janet's painting, and also a FOMO part that came up when I realized, oh crap, I missed Janet's meeting. and
So FOMA is, I see, I didn't know this until earlier with Sarah, fear of missing out part. Yes.
yes. So I had these two parts come up. My artist part was like, oh, we need to paint. And okay, we will. And I was just okay with that part.
Yeah. And yes, beautiful. So some of us might be like, oh, a part that just needs to paint, but that's really light. That's not like a lot of contractions, not a lot of fear. Like, well, if you look at my, compared with me, I've got this part that's like feels like really angry, upset, shameful, or it's like resistant. But could it be that it's the same? This meeting our parts, this okayness, the okayness that meets the one that wants to express that, gosh, I missed Janet's class. I want to go to an art class. I want to express. It's the same if it's meeting that part or if it's meeting like a deep, dark, burdened part, that it's really the same meeting. It's the same grace that Rhonda's describing, the same openness, the same. What else, Sarah?
Yeah, something came up with how there's I have so many parts. And then there was even a part that was afraid, oh, what's gonna happen to all of us? Like, are some of us not gonna be here? Yeah, I had that fear coming up over and over again. I had a feeling like, oh, if I unburden the part, then it's just not gonna be there anymore. Then
Oh,
I realized, oh no, that's not how it works. And
let me ask a question here. Like when we hear Sarah say that there are parts that are some scared of disappearing. Am I going to disappear if the burden goes away? Am I going to just dissolve into this beingness? Can we relate to that? Because this is where I find IFS is just brilliant as a spiritual path, because lots of paths talk about contraction, everything dissolving into self, disappearing into unity. That's not what we do here in the IFS model. We unburden our parts, and then we've got these precious unburdened parts. This is the pure innocence that's left as the part. And I love that. But just can we all relate to that? And then one more question for all of us and for Sarah with this. Do we have a part that kind of wants some of the parts to disappear? That maybe it does see some of these parts as troublesome, as problematic, as not so beautiful. And instead of just wanting to like the welcoming and the unburdening, it's like, oh, I really want that one to disappear. Do you have a part like that, Sarah?
oh yes, there's that critic.
Yeah.
It doesn't approve like of the rejected part. There was a resistance of some sort to it. And the resistance was the pain in my shoulder. Like it was the feelings of rejection and the resistance to feeling rejected. It was all there in just one ball of pain. And with the critic, it just stopped resisting. It wasn't there anymore. And the distracted part wasn't there anymore. And the rejected one wasn't feeling that anymore. It was just is. There was no more pain.
How about this difference for all of us between like parts, the helper parts? Sometimes there's psychotherapy parts, there are achiever parts that come in that want to help and make things better. Because often their solution is to this is how the parts get exiled, to kind of push it away, push it down, or try to make it disappear, right? We all have the parts that come in that way. And I have those that have come up today like that. And then then there's also the self that meets it, this okayness, this what is, this welcoming. Just to notice the contrast. And like, can we even be fascinated by the contrast? Final words at all this, Sarah, then we'll see what this evoked for the others.
Thank you, Sid. Yeah, I feel like this is it. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, as we shake that off, we've got like 7 more minutes left. Anything as we hear Sarah's exquisite sharing there about how it all played in her system, what does that evoke for you? What comes up for you in response? Who's got something?
Thank you, Sarah. I just appreciate so much how the ease that you are able to flow with your parts and recognition and shifting and the presence that you have to whatever's coming up. Just beautiful. And there was something you said that reminded me that 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 the suffering, in my experience, the suffering doesn't come from whatever the negative part is that shows up. It comes from the resistance to it, and that part that doesn't want it to be there. And yeah, that was a really good reminder. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Rhonda. Who else? Anything up for Susan and Janet? As we start moving towards closure, how are we all doing? Especially Susan, your first time with us. Like we want to have a really gentle landing for you. How are you doing?
It's been it's been quite rich experience. And it's nice to hear that Sarah has a lot of parts, because I think I have a lot of part. I don't know if we all do or not, but feels like there's a lot going on. And there is a part that was interesting what you called us to. It was interesting that I've got a part that would just like ones that are problematic to not exist. It's sort of easier if they didn't exist at all than have to go through an unburdening and a meeting, and it would just be quicker. You know, like I think going back to my Milky Way and the planets are parts, we just blow Earth up, you know, and get it over and done with, rather than having to go through the pains of the process. So it was good to see that part too.
And can that one be? Can we see the dearness in that part? The founder of IFS says no bad parts. The dearness of, gosh, this is so much. Can we just like have that one just kind of blow up and dissolve and the dearness, how it's there for you, wanting your best interest in the very best way it can.
Yeah, it likes speed.
Yeah, it's like, gosh, this is taking so long. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm trained in this. I facilitate other people, and it's still, oh my gosh.
Just get it done and clean. And it likes, you know, cleaning up and having it all tight. You know, that's a bit like the teacher one. I've obviously got quite a few of those. They probably work together.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I like the it's lovely the way well, it's very accepting and allowing. That's, you know, that's beautiful here. Beautiful. I mean, it's like radical acceptance. You know, it's just like, and we accept that, and then even that, and that. That's amazing, really. It's just amazing. And to do it in a group, it's kind of more powerful than if you're doing it with your therapist. Of course, they're going to have radical acceptance, you know. Just in a group like this, it feels that we're all reminding each other that we can radically accept all these parts. It's yeah, it's exciting and a relief. Thank you.
Thank you. I have like that really evokes something in me. But before I say that, I would say anything else, Janet, Rhonda, Sarah, any kind of final words? Because then I got Susan just really touched something. I've got good Janet.
So the part that is
Oh,
not wanting the pain, like showing that, you know, this is what was the original, and then like the wants acknowledgement that there's pain throughout all the system always, like they want that known, like, don't forget me. Yeah, this is great, but don't forget I'm here too, you know.
and show us that the second part again. How does that tell us about the pain that's in that? That's
Yeah, so
fully
the
included.
pain is like the lightning, and it's not the same color as gold. It's like this copper, different material. And these are the parts that it's throughout them, you know, like don't look at me as separate, like I'm through and through the system, you know. So it's like all these color parts, and they're like in there too. It's like really
Wow.
strong, you know. So technically, I guess you could say like this in here, you know, like with self and these great snuggling parts. This part wants to be known throughout that too.
I am so loving where we went today, which we just got this artistic depiction, bringing it all together. And I feel like Susan is just, for me, just where she went with the radical acceptance of where we went. And what it evokes is it possible that this radical acceptance is just, to use Sarah's word, what is? This radical acceptance is just effortlessly here, is that light, that grace that Rhonda spoke of. What we're seeing in Sarah's art, this radical acceptance of the lightning, the parts, the pain, that they're just, that beingness is, that our nature is this radical acceptance, my experience today is that that's what we got from each of us. Each of us shared our version of that, which was just so cool. That's all I have to say. Any final thoughts from Rhonda or Sarah before we close?
No, just gratitude. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Sid. Thank you, everyone.
God.
This was beautiful today.
Such a treat being with everybody, and thank you all so much for this co-creation we did, and come back soon. Have a wonderful day, everybody.